morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you are and when you are during this event, which has been organized for the Green Roof and Walls of the World Virtual Summit 2013, Connecting the Planet with Living Architecture. This has all been organized by Greenroofs.com. My name is Maureen Connelly, and I have the pleasure of moderating the panel discussion. The panel topic is Sky Parks in the Urban Realm, Elevating Greenways and Urban Connectivity. First, I will introduce our panelists, and I'll do that in speaker order. After the introductions, each of the three panelists will present their individual contributions, and then I will endeavor to moderate what I hope will be an insightful discussion, which will provide us all with clues on how we can advance urban habitat on rooftops and increase the livability of our cities. So first I will introduce Puay Tan. Puay Tan has been invited to discuss the experiences and the precedents from the city of Singapore and provide a global context to advance the vision of sky parks and elevating greenways in the public realm. Dr. Tan is an associate professor in the Department of Architecture of the National University of Singapore, where he contributes to the master's programs in landscape architecture and integrated sustainable design. His teaching and research are centered around policy, practices, and management of greenery and ecology in the context of high density and compact cities like Singapore. Prior to joining academia, Puay spent a number of years in the National Parks Board, which is a national custodian of urban greenery and the reserves of Singapore. He contributed in various capacities, including the management of the living collection of the Singapore Botanical Gardens and the management of research programs, including that of its Center for Urban Greenery and Ecology. He has been actively involved in research, promotional efforts, and policy formulation in the high-rise greening of Singapore, known locally as Skyrise Greening, since the commencement of an active promotion in the early 2000s. Since then, Puay has contributed to 19 publications in this area, including the first book on plant selection for green roofs in the tropics, development of the first green roof and green wall research demonstration projects in Singapore, and the development of monetary incentive schemes on green roof implementation, and provided input on various related policies. So welcome, Puay, and I thank you for joining the panel.
Thank you, Maureen.
I am now going to introduce Sadhu Johnston, the Deputy City Mayor and City Manager's Office in the City's Manager's Office of the City of Vancouver. Sadhu will present Vancouver's Greenest City Action Plan, which I believe will provide a framework to advance the vision of elevated parks in the public realm. As Deputy City Manager, Sadhu contributes to the overall management of the City of Vancouver. Sadhu oversees the environmental and emerging management areas within the city's management's office, including oversight of the implementation of the Greenest Cities Action Plan, including programs such as curbside organic collection, public bike share implementation, district energy strategy development, and the electrical vehicle deployment. And there's certainly a number of other areas as well. Sadhu has oversight of the Resilient Cities initiatives, such as the city's earthquake plan, the city's heavy urban search and rescue team, and the city's climate adaptation strategy development and implementation plans. Sadhu is a founder and co-chair of the Urban Sustainability Directors Network, a network of over 120 municipal staff focused on greening their cities. It's representing over 50 million urban dwellers in North America. Sadhu is also chair of the executive committee of the STAR community, which helps cities and countries achieve meaningful sustainability through the first national framework for local community efforts and tools that measure process and progress. So welcome, Sadhu. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Randall Sharp is one of Vancouver's preeminent landscape architects and will provide us with an overview of the dynamic greening projects in Vancouver and the region. Randy Sharp is a graduate of the University of Oregon in landscape architecture. In 1980, Randy Sharp established a practice in Vancouver that has grown into Sharp and Diamond Landscape Architecture, Inc. His firm is committed to ecologically based solutions for site development and designs that blend nature and architecture. The firm designed and coordinated the installation of over 100 green roofs in British Columbia and won the first ever Green Wall Award for Excellence from Green Roofs for Healthy Cities in 2009. Randy also designed the site landscape and green roofs for other award-winning projects, including the Burnside Gorge Community Centre, the Fairmont Empress Hotel in Victoria, Vancouver International Airport, Broadway Tech Centre, which I think we're going to see something of today, and the Seymour Filtration Plant, and the Seasheld RCMP and Justice Centre as well. Mr. Sharp, Randy, developed the course in Green Walls 101, an introduction to design, installation, and maintenance of green facades, living walls, and vertical gardens, which is taught in cities across North America. Randy is a sessional instructor at BCIT and assists in the preparation of the Grow 1000 course, focusing on the design and construction of green roofs. He's also the author of Ecological Site Development and Regional Strategies for Design, Construction, and Maintenance for Metro Vancouver, and the Waterwise Landscape Guidelines for the City of Vancouver. So thank you very much, Randy, for joining the panel.
Pleasure to be here.
I think I'm going to... Yes.
I'd like to introduce Maureen Connelly. Dr. Maureen Connelly is the director of the Center for Architectural Ecology at the BCIT School of Construction and Environment. Added to Maureen's academic background in the sciences, graduate work in interdisciplinary studies, and professional affiliation as an architect, Maureen's two-year exposure in the mid-'80s to the flourishing green roof industry in Germany and other parts of Europe made her the perfect candidate to develop the vision, oversee the construction, and the instrumentation of the BCIT first green roof research facility in 2002. Maureen's initial research focused on the architectural and planning impact of green roofs, which led to phase 1 research findings on stormwater and thermal performance of green roofs in the temperate BC rainforest. Maureen developed the first credited course on green roofs in Canada, delivered in the Architectural Science program at BCIT. She contributes to the Master's program in Applied Sciences and Building Engineering and supports undergraduate and graduate student research in architectural and acoustical ecology. Maureen's current research focuses on the quantification of the acoustical capacity for green roofs and living walls to reduce sound transmission through buildings, reduce noise buildup in urban areas, and enhance personal and shared soundscapes. She continues to direct the strategic research and planning process at the BCIT Center for Architectural Ecology. She received the BCIT Applied Research Award for outstanding contribution to the advancement of the knowledge and economic and societal well-being through the application and implementation of new technology, and most recently accepted the Canadian Institute of Energy 2010 Research and Development Award on behalf of the Center. And Maureen is certainly the cornerstone of the green roof industry here in British Columbia. Welcome aboard.
Thank you, Randy. Well, now we'll begin our panel discussion. And I do want to first set a little context for how we want to place our discussion or our visions about inhabiting rooftops. Now, we all know that vegetated roofs are advancing a fundamental goal of reducing adverse effects of construction and the development on natural systems and on global health. So this is good. The benefits and the ecological impacts of vegetated roofs are recognized within broad categories of energy efficiency, habitat and biodiversity, water and waste management, materials and resources, air pollution, and carbon sequestration. Okay, that's fine. The primary research in this city 10 years ago was to quantify the site level contributions of green roofs towards stormwater mitigation and thermal efficiencies. And this work, and then my own focus lately on acoustics and the soundscape contributions of these green roofs, really put me up on top of rooftops for very extensive and long time periods. Spend a lot of time on the rooftops. And I sense that all those involved with urban rooftops, whether it be through design or construction or maintenance, and all those using the rooftops for urban agriculture, or those few fortunate souls that actually have rooftop decks, truly feel that we inhabit an elevated plane in our city. And this elevated plane, this is the one that I want us to talk about today. Should we or could we introduce that plane to the public realm for all the masses to enjoy and increase the livability within our dense urban centers? What I want to do just to complete this context is show some images from a student of mine. These images were created by Sarah Bergen as part of her scholarship project exploring the revitalization of Cornelia Oberlander's infamous Vancouver Public Library roof. We're looking towards creating occupied space and habitat on that roof. So Sarah explored the connectivity of this rooftop to other rooftops in the city. Sarah investigated the experiential qualities of the roofscape, and the urban connectivity through our senses of sight, through touch, through hearing, and ultimately we're going to explore the physical connectivity. It actually all started with a discussion on roof marks. This investigation you can see in the image here reflects rooftop connectivity, and you can see how much more of the city there is from the roof plane. The first row you're seeing are roof marks that you can see from grade in downtown Vancouver. The bottom row of images are the roof marks you can see from the same locations but elevated up on the roof. That was the visual connectivity. In terms of the sonic connectivity, we began to explore the rooftop soundscape. So how is it different from grade level? Okay, there's the residual street traffic noise as it propagates and attenuates up over the edge of the roofs. There's mechanical system noise, but there's also natural sounds on the rooftops introduced by the plants and the inhabitants of the roof. We also uncovered sound marks that were drowned out in the traffic din. They reemerged once we were up on that roof. When we look at physical activity, physical connection across the rooftops, we really needed to understand the building form, but we had to eliminate the grade discussion. So we have a quick image here of just the rooftops and how they might be connected by bridges through the city. Cornelia Oberlander specifically requested a discussion of a physical bridge from the library roof to the post office roof. The post office is a complete city block with a heliport and basketball, and it's just waiting to be introduced to the public realm as a sky park corridor. And this will be a focus of a new project. Sarah provided us with the precedents of New York's High Line project or Vancouver's Loyal Street vegetated pedestrian bridge, and even the precedents of beaches and seawalls to connect as connections in the city. I think they are precedents to creating sky gardens in the public realm. I think this panel in front of me are going to give us some of the answers we need to make this happen. I'm sure there are solutions in Singapore. I think there's solutions in the Green City Action Plan. And I think our regional success in urban greening is really going to help us in the discussion. So with pleasure, I pass the web over to Dr. Tan. Poyok, you're there, and Poyok's in the city of Singapore.
Thank you, Maureen. It's a great pleasure to join the panel for the discussion, and thanks again to Linda for organizing this as well. Now, I have been involved, as you mentioned, in the urban greening and promotion of skyrise greening in Singapore for a number of years. And here I thought it would be useful for me to just share my perspectives on just two areas. First, why Singapore wanted to push for high-rise greening in the environment. And secondly, what are the outcomes that we have we are enjoying now in terms of success in pushing for high-rise greening. Right, so firstly on the motivating factors, I think the primary motivating factor for pushing for more greening in the high-rise environment is really for Singapore to cope with urbanization and increasing population density. Now, Singapore, as most people are aware, is a very small, it's also a very dense city. On a city basis, its population density is perhaps even comparable with that of Hong Kong. But unlike Hong Kong, Singapore is also a country. So as a country, it has to set aside land for areas such as for water catchment, for military land uses, even for agriculture in the city. which would normally be not required for city. So as a country, it faces, I think, even more severe land constraints compared to a typical city. So really here with increasing population density, the pressure here, I guess, that we're experiencing for the last couple of years or even the last decade is to set aside adequate green spaces. And these are required, as acknowledged by many people, required for enhancing livability and sustainability of the built environment. So really here, we are talking about this as a primary motivating factor for pushing for high-rise greening, right? If the ground level space is more or less saturated, then the only public space that we have now is to push our green into the elevated plane. And this took the form of what is known here as sky-rise greening. And the active promotion efforts really started perhaps in the late 1990s to early 2000. Of course, it's not to say that there wasn't any rooftop gardens before that, but this was by far few in between. And what we're talking about is an active promotion effort to push for more high-rise greening throughout the public space as well as private spaces. Now, that's the first motivating factor. Now, the second motivating factor is really that we are all aware, it has been shown by scientific evidence that with increasing urbanization and loss of green spaces, there are severe changes in the biophysical environment of the city. And we are looking forward to use green spaces to counter some of these negative effects. And there were quite a number of studies, and some of these are still in progress in Singapore, to show how we could actively include green spaces and use the greenery to mitigate negative effects of urbanization phenomenon, such as the urban heat island effect, stormwater drainage systems, meaning slowing down stormwater discharge into our drainage systems, improving water quality in our water catchment, even using green spaces to conserve and enhance the biodiversity of Singapore. And last but not least is to foster the mental and also the well-being of Singaporeans through exposure and visual relief that green spaces bring about. Right, so these are the two main, in my view, two main clusters of factors why Singapore has actively put in efforts to push for high-rise greening in the urban environment. And in the academic language, I guess this is saying that we are using green spaces to deliver ecosystem services for Singapore. Now, this has been going on for the last decade or last decade or more, and I think it's fair to say that there has been good progress through the kind of efforts that have been put in, and we do now see elevated green spaces in different kinds of spaces in the city, and I'll tend to classify them into three major types of spaces. These are public spaces, semi-public spaces, and private spaces. Now, in the public spaces, by far, I think the most important public spaces relevant to high-rise greening is really the public housing estate of Singapore. Now, Singaporeans live in high-rise apartments, and this is the majority of Singaporeans, about 85%, live in high-rise public housing. You'll see some examples of this in the slides that I've prepared. And over here in the public housing, rooftop gardens, which are constructed typically above multi-story car parks, has become a design norm in the last decade or so. And the primary effect here is that we do see a multi-story car park or rooftop garden above a multi-story car park that is in close proximity to the residents, or and this in effect brings green into close proximity for easy access by the residents. Now, the second category of space are what I call semi-public spaces. These are in fact public infrastructures, but they have certain operating hours, and therefore they are close to public at certain hours. And I think there are good examples of semi-public spaces now in Singapore that have embraced the concept of having rooftop gardens or sky-rise gardens that in actual fact is creating multifunctional uses in the land that we have. So for instance, one good example here is the green roof above the palm room of the Marina Barrage. And again, there's a slide in the presentation that I used to illustrate. Now, it was interesting to note here, that originally the building was conceived to be just a utilitarian palm room that engineers will simply design. But it was decided that instead of just a farm room with normal rooftop that's concrete and waterproof, there should be green roof that should be constructed. Decision was made to invest in it, and I think that has been a fantastic decision. Not only has it enhanced the look and feel of the place now, as you can see from the image, it has also become a very heavily used space for picnics and kite flying, with a very fantastic view of the Singapore skyline. And there are also other examples of such buildings in Singapore, such as the National Library, as well as the Khoo Teck Puat Hospital that has been presented earlier in other conferences. And the third kind of space that I'd like to talk about are private spaces. And I think this is where we're also beginning to see an increasing trend of using green to create distinctive architecture, or if you may, tropical architecture in Singapore. And I think that the private spaces are perhaps one of the early adopters of skyrise greening in Singapore. But over the years, we are beginning to see a bolder and more, in fact, more overseas architects displaying their creativity in the buildings they are designing in Singapore. So for instance, you do see a building by Daniel Libeskind, The Reflections, that promote or incorporate the use of rooftop or sky bridges to create recreational spaces for residents. OMA has also recently created a building which is almost nearing completion now, called the Interlace, that displays rooftop gardens as spaces for residents to use. Sky Habitat by Moshi Savdi is also coming up, incorporating plenty of balconies and skyrise spaces for residents. There's a local design firm called Woha, which is also displaying, which designed a very interesting project, which I think is by far the most green project that we can see in Singapore at the moment. It is nearing completion, and this is Park Royal at Pickering. Again, I show examples of this in the slides. So I think with the kind of efforts that are put in by different design professionals, and typically you involve the collaboration between the landscape architects and architects, we are going to see greater innovation and more wonderful creations in the city of Singapore. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Puay. Sadhu Johnston, I would like to now ask you to speak about Vancouver and the Greenest City Action Plan.
Great, thanks Maureen. And thank you, Dr. Tan. That was very interesting to see the images and hear the stories from Singapore. And it's wonderful to see some of the same things happening in Singapore as here in Vancouver. So thank you very much, and great to be here with you. What I'd like to touch on briefly is the City of Vancouver's Greenest City Action Plan and the work that we're doing to try to transform the urban landscape, and then of course the integration to how that translates to the rooftop. So on the first slide here, you see this is emblematic of the types of changes that we're trying to make across our city organizations, across North America and around the world. I believe cities are rethinking how they traditionally do what they do, and finding ways to provide greater value from the infrastructure that we have on the ground in our city. As you'll see in slide 2, our City Council adopted recently a new plan for the greening of our city called the Greenest City 2020. And the Greenest City Action Plan has, as you'll see in slide 3, 10 key areas that we are looking to drive the greening across the entire city. And it goes from green jobs to climate, to buildings and transportation, waste, access to nature, our ecological footprint as a city, clean water, clean air, and local food. So there's a great deal of work that we're doing across these various areas. And as you see in slide 4, what we've realized is that we need to integrate, and we have an opportunity to integrate the work we do on land use, both in our own operations, from how we pave our streets to how we maintain our parks, but beyond that to the transportation infrastructure and the energy infrastructure. And many of those actually have overlaps with the work that we can do on our rooftops. So on slide 6, you'll see we have been able to actually change the trends in the city of Vancouver. And traditionally, you do a transportation plan, you do a land use plan, you maybe do an energy plan, And those plans have interfacing elements, but they don't really tie in together integrally. And I think that integral connection is really what enables us to take this work to the next level. And it can happen over multiple years. So what we've been able to do, just by providing more transit-oriented development and strong in-transportation infrastructure, as you'll see on slide 5, is actually change the trends. We've been able to increase our population that are spending time or that are living downtown during the day that are there by about 75% from 1996 to 2011. We've been able to increase our jobs in that same period by about 26% downtown. And we've been able to increase the number of people coming downtown by about 15%. Yet we've been able to decrease the number of vehicles coming into downtown by 25%. What we're able to do is transition more people living there, more people working there, less people coming in on a daily basis by car, more people coming in with alternative transportation. And as you'll see on the following slide, we're trying to integrate that work into thinking around district energy and how we provide energy to our homes. We've recently, as a part of our work on the development of the Olympic Village in neighborhood, we've built our first district energy system that is a low-carbon system, and you'll see the smokestacks actually coming off of underneath the bridge are in the shape of a hand. That was a public art project where we take the sewage and coming out of downtown and take the heat out of it to heat an entire neighborhood. And so that allows for people living in that neighborhood to have about a 70% lower greenhouse gas profile than they would otherwise if they were using traditional natural gas heating. On the next slide, you'll see that the tie-in with mobility and providing more opportunities for people to travel without needing a car, and a drastic increase in access to our communities, our neighborhoods, with separated bike lanes. And so finding ways to integrate all of those components with really good urban design, as you'll see in our next slide, trying to bring nature onto the street and bring the softscapes into the work that we do along the waterfront. As you'll see in the next slide, we've actually been building infrastructure to really bring nature back into the city. So there's a lot we've been doing to integrate our planning, to bring nature into that design. But as you'll see in the next slide, that work is now translating onto the rooftops as well, and finding more ways to enable the fifth facade of the building that is often neglected, the place we put the HVAC equipment. Perhaps maybe there's a penthouse there typically, but providing that opportunity to make that usable space. And the first thing is for new construction, make sure we're using that space productively, producing energy, providing outdoor space, providing nature space. And so you'll see the Olympic Village here, the way that we integrated green roofs, much has been done in Singapore. And the following slide there, you'll see that as well. Provide outdoor recreational opportunities for people that are living in those buildings. And make sure that we're doing that in all of our larger infrastructure investments. The next two slides you'll see tie in with the work that we've done to bring the convention center construction, a 6-acre green roof there, that while it's not accessible to people, it certainly is something that many thousands of people view every day, and they get to see the wind blowing the grass. We have beehives up there that we use to harvest and serve to customers below in the convention center. So there's a lot that we can do more on traditional green roofs. But what we know is we've got a lot of legacy buildings, parking garages and other types of buildings that we can also bring these same concepts into. And we can actually have highly productive agriculture. And so the following slide, what you'll see is a parking garage that has been largely vacant on the upper floors because we've been able to reduce the number of cars coming into downtown so considerably that we now have vacancies on our parking garages. So we have a parking garage that's owned by the city, and we actually partnered with a local clean technology company, and we leased them about 6,000 square feet of space, and they've built one of our first vertical farms, one of the first vertical farms in North America, on the rooftop of this facility. In the following slide, you'll see their technology there, where they actually grow food in racks on the rooftop of this previously vacant space. And the following slide there, you'll see the actual packaging. What we're able to do is grow 150,000 pounds of produce annually in 6,000 square feet of previously vacant parking garage space. And what that enables us to do is to provide really fresh, pick that morning produce to our Vancouver residents with 0 food kilometers, so really low carbon food, taking advantage of abandoned roof spaces. And I'd like to close with the point here that we have a lot of new construction and we have a lot of existing buildings. And I think we have an opportunity by looking at 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years, 8 years in the case of our Greenest City Action Plan, which plots out ways that we can go green by now, between now and 2020, to ensure that we have a green city. And we really want to make sure we're taking a look at the rooftop space to bring nature into our city, to grow food, to provide outdoor spaces for people, and to really create that linkage from nature on the street and along our waterfronts onto our rooftops. So a very exciting opportunity, and we believe that generally we overestimate what we can achieve in 1 year, and we typically underestimate what we can do in 5. So this is going to take some longer range work, but we're very excited about the opportunities to green our skyline. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sadhu. And Randall Sharp, if you can now contribute with your experience from our city and the regions beyond.
Well, thank you very much. It's a great opportunity to participate with the panel. Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Maureen, to set this up. And thank you, Sadhu, for your fabulous work. City of Vancouver, it is an outstanding place to practice. I'd like to talk about 2 primary objectives in our work, and that is having access to the rooftops, or access to the sky, access to nature is fundamental in our needs. And then secondly, talk about partnerships with enterprise and the public realm to facilitate sky parks, rooftop gardens, and urban connections. Our work has been very, very diverse, and we've been greening structures, well, 35 years in my practice, probably 50 years in Vancouver, since zoning in the late 60s, early 70s mandated most of parking to be underground, covered with rooftop gardens. The first project I'm going to show is a civic project. It's the Deusen Botanic Garden, and it's an outstanding place where we combined architecture, landscape, ecology, and art. It's truly an inspirational project, and developing a truly organic form of building meant to be visible from the street. It's a landmark building, wood first, and it features lightweight construction, sloping green roofs. And I'm going through the slides. It's part of net zero energy and net zero water. Water is collected on the roof. There's multiple energy systems. There's treatment as well. Construction was done over the course of 12 months, and it is beautifully vegetated. I'm just moving through the slides. Broadway Tech Center is a 4-block neighborhood in East Vancouver. It's built largely on top of the Eaton's Warehouse complex, so it's a brownfield site. It also features I believe the only City of Vancouver street that's entirely built over roof deck, over the former warehouse, which is converted to parking. The whole street is modular. Broadway Tech is truly an example of green economy, both the companies who have located there, as well as a number of jobs to create. The buildings are LEED Gold certified. They're major urban connections to SkyTrain from the neighborhood, so it's a great example of urban connectivity, rooftop gardens, intensive gardens, and water gardens on the ground plane. And then up on the top of the roofs, we feature sedum mats, only 2 inches in depth, 12 inches of weight per square foot saturated, ultra lightweight, and constantly changing throughout the year. A big driver in Vancouver, and one Vancouver is very well known for its high-rise residential developments, again, built on multiple rooftops and creating places for amenity. We've also worked on green infrastructure projects, both rooftop gardens at the airport as well as one of the largest living walls in North America. And it's all about connecting the Canada line down to the coastal rainforest. And in Vancouver, Maureen mentioned a couple of the sky bridges. The Carroll Street Sky Bridge, which is close to the Dunsmuir Viaduct, is a great example of connecting parkland over major city streets. The Laurel Street Sky Bridge is also a great example. Part of it is rooftop construction, and part of it is using excavated soils from various developments to create topography in our city. Sadhu also mentioned urban agriculture. We've been volunteering with projects in place for the permitting and design layout of the Soul Food Farms in Vancouver. This is the largest farm by Rogers Arena. It's rooftop type construction built entirely over the tarmac left over from the Indy 500 races in Vancouver. Urban agriculture in greenhouses, the Altera Systems project with the aeroponics and various greenhouses are proposed. The transportation systems, the bike routes in Vancouver under the tree-lined streets are very pleasant, and now downtown with the separated bike routes are very good, and it's a major transformation. And as you see in the upper slide, combining SkyTrain with Sky Gardens and bikeways is very good. Vancouver has opportunities for sky parks. There's been a lot of debate about the Georgia and Dunsmuir viaducts, what to do with it. Certainly if one of the viaducts came down and be replaced by high-rise residential, that could be the economic generator to transform the Dunsmuir Viaduct into a sky park. Already very actively used. It's a bicycle freeway from the east side of Vancouver into downtown. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Randy. So we're back, and one of the things we really want to talk about is we've been very successful through different mechanisms of advancing green roof technologies and opening up green roofs. And now we want to know, how could we bring green roofs, sky gardens into the public realm? And that's our discussion today. Puay comes from a city that has a fair amount of precedence of sky gardens in the public realm. So we thought you could review some of those precedents for us, if you don't mind. Puay.
I'm going to just recap what I presented earlier and to highlight a few factors that are going to make rooftop gardens on public realm possible. And one of these factors to me is really upstream planning and design, meaning that if you are designing for a rooftop garden, especially on public buildings, then it is a matter of designing it right at the start of a public building. And usually this is quite difficult because rooftop gardens are usually hidden from view of pedestrians. They do not know that there's a rooftop garden, especially if it's high up in the sky. So designing for access and giving proper signages, to me, is one important factor. The second factor to me is really about planning policies and planning regulations. Even though some public buildings have rooftop gardens, they are not designed for open public access in the sense that there are restricted hours of usage, for instance. So really, it requires a coordinated policy on the part of planning authorities to make sure that the rules and regulations are clear right at the start for designing of public spaces. These are, to me, two of the important factors that will go a long way to ensure that no public spaces on rooftops can be used for public access all the time. Yeah.
Do we have any, Sadhu, do we have anything like that coming up through the Greenest City Action Plan where rooftop spaces become part of the public realm? I mean, we have that when the rooftop is really accessible, such as the courthouse, the public courthouse by Arthur Erickson and Cornelia Oberlander. But do we have anything where it'll help get it up higher? Sadhu.
Well, thank you. In Vancouver here, as you know, there's been we've had a significant priority toward greening our rooftops and making them accessible. Most of them are private spaces still. There are a couple of exciting proposals that are emerging now, though. One is a large redevelopment of a shopping center called Oak Ridge. They're planning a really significant sized green roof that would be publicly accessible and over part of the shopping center. And I think as cities get built out and there's less and less opportunities for new green spaces that are publicly accessible, the rooftop becomes the greatest opportunity to do that. So I think you're going to see more and more emphasis here in Vancouver and in other cities to make those spaces not just green and not just accessible to the residents, but really available to the public to be able to go there all
Maybe
times.
I can add to that. Yes, Vancouver is a city that, correct me if I'm wrong, Sadhu, probably 30-40% of the area in the city is already in the public realm, be it streetscapes, parks, open spaces. And the city has made a recent proposal for a sky park on the Granville Street Bridge that will connect where I am to downtown, and it may spur in development beside and below. Granville has for years wanted a connection up through Granville Street Bridge to make that connection. We're also working at Vancouver International Airport. Technically it's across the river from Vancouver. However, we are now building and designing a sky park for transferring passengers coming from domestic flights going to international flights. And it will be a continuous one-way corridor ringed with a rooftop garden that has a First Nations estuary theme. There's other opportunities. We do have some public links at Citygate that was started back in 1988, right after Expo. And of course, Robson Square and the post office site is up for redevelopment as well, and making links to that across Georgia Street to Library Square. There's a lot of talk, a lot of opportunity, and we have quite an amazing group of architects, urban designers, landscape architects, and structural engineers that could make it happen.
Puay, can you give us a little bit more of the details of what you'd have to see in policy to support this?
Well, one example that I can cite is perhaps the incorporation of rooftop green spaces in our public residential estates. Now, in the past, the residential estates were planned for a certain proportion of green spaces within the housing estate, and these are typically at the ground level. And with estates being upgraded, one of the new policies that have come in, well, you can call it a policy, you can call it a design guideline. And one of them that has, to me, been very effective is to incorporate rooftop gardens above multi-story car parks. Now, land being a premium in Singapore, in the past we had multi-story car parks with a bare roof, and the roof was obviously an eyesore to residents who are facing the car park, as well as creating unfavorable microclimatic conditions, for instance, in terms of heat, glare, and perhaps noise as well. So one of the policies that have come in over the last perhaps 7 to 8 years was that whenever there was a rooftop garden, or there's a rooftop garden that's being designed, or rather when there's a multi-story car park that has been incorporated into a housing estate, there will be a rooftop garden above the multi-story car park. And the advantages of this is obviously that the rooftop garden help to negate some of the negative environmental impacts of having a bare concrete facing residents. And at the same time, it encourages close proximity. It allows a close proximity for residents to use those public green spaces. So this is an example of a policy, perhaps, that is coordinated at a large-scale island-wide level whenever new housing estates are being developed or redeveloped. Yeah, this is to me one example of that. Yeah, does that sort of answer that question?
That's great. What do you think? What do you think we have, Sadhu?
What do I think we have?
Yeah, in our Greenest action plan, that's going to support more of the public realm talk. I know it's just great for green roofs, and we're going there, but more of the public realm. Or do you think it's just always going to come from private initiatives?
No, I think I do think policy will help to drive it, and I think many of the examples that Randy brought up are being driven partly by policy. I mean, we require anytime there's a rezoning, we require that, or particularly if it's a larger project, we do require that that the development that is going through the rezoning meets our criteria, and we include in that they need to do an evaluation of whether they can grow food on the site, with how they're managing stormwater, so a whole series of criteria. So through our own programs and policies, we can drive the private sector, but we're also looking at our own infrastructure, as Randy said. I mean, even bridges, looking at making them beautiful sky gardens that people can use for pedestrian purposes, but also to enjoy the vistas and get fresh air. So I think there's a lot that cities can do in their own infrastructure, certainly in our own buildings. But then we can use our policies, our tools, to engage the private sector to do more of this. And so I think you're going to see a lot more of this in the upcoming years, as I've indicated.
Has anybody out there have experience on the business of urban agriculture, and how the acquisition of a network of rooftops can support the scale, an increased scale of urban agriculture?
Well, there's a lot of
the
restaurants.
example
Sorry.
Oh, no, you go ahead, Randy.
Well, there's a lot of restaurants in Vancouver which already have kitchen gardens. The Fairmount Waterfront Hotel has a lovely garden that is viewed from a lot of the surrounding buildings. There's Soul Food, which is trying to get gardens up on top of parkades. Altera has rented the Richard Street Parkade, as you mentioned, for food production, and of course a big component at the Olympic Village.
But do you think a connection across rooftops can help that?
If I can build off that. Oh, I'm not sure, to be honest, I'm not sure a connection between rooftops is really critical to that. I mean, I think what we're seeing on the larger scale, larger output farming, I mentioned Alteris in my presentation, and that Randy just mentioned it as well. I mean, they're able to grow about 150,000 pounds of produce in 4,000 square feet by building a pretty intensive vertical farm on the top of one of our parking garages. And really, the value of that is they can drive their trucks for delivery straight up to the rooftop because it is a parking garage and then straight down. So they don't need the connectivity rooftop to rooftop. They actually, what they really need is great connectivity from the rooftop to the ground, so that they can do the distribution within the downtown area. So, you know, I'm not sure that the connection from rooftop to rooftop is critical. I think the views are important, being able to experience it, but being able to get up and down is actually probably equally important or more important than the connectivity between rooftop to rooftop.
Yeah, I'll agree with that point as well.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely.
Yeah,
it's just if you have an adjoining roof next door that does not have the grade level connectivity, if it can borrow off the roof across the street or across the laneway that does, that's when we could talk about some expansion.
Yeah, I'm just, you know, to be honest, I mean, the expense of building that and working out the logistics, but, you know, just of a sky bridge from rooftop to rooftop, you know, I'm not sure, to be honest, of the value of the expense of that unless you're developing a project from the get-go where that's intended. I think to me, really, the connectivity from the ground so that people can get up there, enjoy the views, and participate in the farming, or enjoy being up there.
I mentioned in my...
I
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I agree with Sadhu's point as well. I think the connectivity between rooftops is probably not that important. I think it is really whether or not the logistics of going up and down the roof can be done in a sort of effective fashion is more important. And beyond that, it's also really about area that is available for rooftop farming. So having sky bridges perhaps is not as important as having a large enough roof to allow for urban farming. Yeah.
Yeah, to start with what you have,
and
potentially a block city.
Well, what we've struggled with a little bit, particularly when we're working with private developments and trying to get them, years ago it was really tough to get developers to even think about doing a green roof. Now we've made the step where they're comfortable with a green roof, but now how do we make it publicly accessible is a bit of a mind bender, because you've got access issues, and then you've got their tenants that are in the building that might be looking down on part of the roof where you're trying to gain access. And then, trying to get them to go to the next level to then say we're going to actually have it be a productive farm where they're going to see farm workers. And the developer's thinking, well, I'm going to have some of the best office space in the entire city, and my tenants are going to have to look out at people doing farm work. And what is that going to look like? And what's it going to smell like? And so, I think we've kind of overcome the barrier of green roofs and developers, and generally there's an industry around that. Now, getting them to think about it as a park space or as an actual farm is kind of the next hurdle. And so we've definitely struggled with bringing developers along with that. And I do think that's kind of it's the next frontier where we're really going to see a whole level of productivity for these spaces, for gaining access, but engaging people, getting their hands in the soil and growing food that can be used in the building. And we've had a few examples of that, but it's really, I think, going to grow in the next few years.
We do have an opportunity in Vancouver, which I mentioned in my presentation. We have the twin viaducts which connect downtown to the east side, Georgia Dunsmuir Viaduct. I did a presentation maybe a year and a half ago which advocated demolishing the Georgia Street Viaduct, which is facing the water side, prime real estate, keeping the Dunsmuir Viaduct, which is already the major bike route, separated bike lanes coming into town, converting the rest to a plant promenade like Paris, like the High Line, and then building the towers, connecting in to the towers at maybe third, fourth story. So the cost of building a sky bridge is exorbitant, but when you have a structure already that is under capacity for vehicles and converting it, and that will bring back development 30 times over. I think that's the factor they're using in High Line in New York. Amazing.
So we focused quite a bit on physical and real connectivity, but there's another type of connectivity, and that's the visual connectivity. And that's something I think both our cities take a lot of pride in, about what you can see out beyond our city and the beauty of the green beyond and the ocean beyond. So, Sadhu, we're fortunate enough to experience view corridors, which are primarily focused from Broadway and out towards the North Shore Mountains. And I guess my question would be to Puay is, once the public realm is enjoying the rooftops, do we now start to see some ownership of the view such that it has to be protected? Do we now start to look at view corridors from some of these new public spaces?
Hello.
Hi, Puay.
Sorry, I probably have to ask you to repeat the question again.
Okay.
So sorry about
So we have a very fortunate situation where we have very beautiful views, and we protect our views to the mountains here in Vancouver. But it's very it's from very specific parts of our city that we have protected our view corridors. Now, if we make rooftops and we put them into the public realm, we have other places and we have other views that are fantastic. And have you had experiences where now you have someone coming back and saying, well, my view corridor, I need to protect that. And the experience is we've given them new access to a new part of the city up high. They have new views, important in terms of connectivity, different types of connectivity. Do you need to protect those views? Have you ever come across that?
Well, certainly where in the realm of urban planning and urban design in Singapore, there are sort of government-regulated view corridors that need to be maintained, and the future developments that could affect the view corridors are then subjected to reviews by government authorities. So it really happens, but and that to me is important. We don't want to have, for instance, new development that blocks the vantage view from vantage point, like on top of a hill. But to me, I think the other dimension that is important is really the view at the pedestrian level, and that has perhaps not been receiving adequate attention here, even in Singapore. And my own view is that we need to look at a range of technologies and tools and instruments that at the urban design level to allow pedestrian view to be safeguarded. And in particular, I think using green roof and green walls to create that vista of green and the sense of pervasive greenery in the city. So to me, because by and large, most people are traveling at the pedestrian level, the ground level view corridor to me is more important. And really, when you're in a building or you're on top of a vantage point above a hilltop, those are occasions that perhaps do not occupy most and do not affect most people. By and large, we go about our daily lives at the pedestrian level. So that to me, therefore, is important to consider in terms of safeguarding of view corridors. Obviously, when we talk about corridors, it is not just about for humans. Largely, I think we also need to think about the effects and the possible contributions of green roofs and green walls as a means of connectivity for biodiversity throughout the city in the form of ecological network. So these are sort of dimensions that we are beginning to explore and grapple with within the city here to try to forge a kind of network that is both visually pleasing as well as effective in promoting biodiversity. Yeah.
Thank you. Any questions coming out from one of you to another?
I have a question for Sadhu. City of Vancouver has the Greenways branch, which is part of engineering, and I believe bridges are under engineering as well. Could there be a Department of Sky Parks that takes it literally to the next level?
I don't envision that we would have a Department of Sky Parks. We do have an engineering department and we've got a parks department, and both of those departments are clearly thinking about ways to do this creatively. I'm not sure creating another department with another silo is the way to get where we want to go. We're trying to break down the silos as much as we can and have engineers think like parks people, and parks people think about how they can use the existing urban infrastructure to achieve their goals by naturalizing spaces and whatnot. So I think I don't see that as like creating departments is not, in my opinion, the right way to really get people thinking creatively about this, especially since so much of this work needs to happen out of the planning department. And so, my sense is that there is a lot of opportunity to really go to the next level, and there's a lot of interest in being creative and doing that and finding creative ways to add green space in. Maybe we take out a street and we put a green space in with an urban garden in it, a farm space, or we find an opportunity to do it on a bridge or on a roof. I think there are a lot of creative ways to do it, but I'm not sure that doing it through a new department is exactly the right way to go. Maybe you're just being cheeky, trying to push to how to get to the next level. And I think it's a great question. We are making progress, but it is incremental. There's a lot. It's incrementalism. We need developers. We need the engineers. Everyone needs to kind of have these experiences and see things, and then they can go to the next level. Like everything kind of builds off of the last thing that we've been able to do.
You know, the idea of a department, you're right. Oh no, another department in City Hall. But the idea of, you know, a virtual department, just like our virtual summit here, where you do have someone from engineering, someone from planning, someone from policy, from all these different groups, that they come together specifically to discuss this question. You know, I think that could bring us somewhere. I mean, there's often funny questions. I mean, so I'm on an academic institution, and I try to get people up onto the roofs all the time. Well, you know, there's fear factor, putting people up in the public realm, you know, unsupervised students. That, let's just start with that one, let alone unsupervised civilians that aren't there for the purposes of research or a very specific reason or a specific and limited time domain.
Wildlife.
So there's a lot of questions out there.
There are. I mean, in Randy's presentation, he had some photos of even some of our bridges here, our pedestrian bridges that have been naturalized. I mean, it's like walking through a park, but they've been designed in a way that you can't really get to the edge. And so, you know, there is a real sense of designing to ensure that people can't get to the edge of things and can't climb over them. And, you know, I mean, I think if we're really going to take this to the next level, there's a certain level of trust we're going to have and understanding we're going to have that people will go to the edge of a space, or they need to be, we need to kind of learn as a culture that there are edges and how those edges work. And it's in many cultures, in India, in South America, in a lot of parts of the world, in Asia, people spend times on the rooftops. In the summer, they may sleep up there, and kids spend time flying their kites from up on rooftops, and it's a part of the culture. And I will say that as you see cities or countries develop, I think the rooftop really becomes closed off. It becomes a place for the electrical and for the HVAC equipment. And so finding ways to re-access that and in a way retrain ourselves as a culture about those spaces and how they operate it's really it's a different kind of learning that we're going to need to do as a culture, and it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to be spaces develop, people experience them, and you see an urban farm or a vertical farm or a beautiful park, and you say there's more we could do on the next project.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
I'll just add a point to this. 90% of Singaporeans live in high-rise apartments, so we're used to heights. So just to support what Sadhu is saying, you can get people accustomed to being at elevated planes without too much fear of people not being responsible and then killing themselves by dropping off. In fact, my view is that really at the ground level where there's so much vehicular traffic is perhaps a far more dangerous place than being able to use a green space above the ground where there's not so much traffic. So it is really getting people used to it. I don't think it's an issue at all about safety. And of course, design will have the large load.
We have in the Olympic Village, actually, in one of our in our LEED Platinum community center there, we have a green roof that is also a playground for the kids. And one of the barriers between the fall and the rooftop garden play area is just a pane of glass, effectively, and the kids can walk right up to the edge and can look down, and you know, they're kind of looking out over the mountains. They're in a garden, but they're on the rooftop, and so I think people will learn that those spaces, and as those kids grow up, they're going to learn that those spaces can be used more productively, and so I think it's there's a cultural shift, just as Pioch's saying, about living even in high rises. And what that takes, and I think we'll see the same thing in the next generation as kids experience that in their own daily lives of what's possible.
You just you hit a wee bit of a nerve on me there when you mentioned the pane of glass, and I know at the Creekside the pane of glass isn't 10 feet high, so it doesn't disrupt what I'd consider another type of connectivity, which is the sonic connectivity. I had quite an experience evaluating the soundscapes of two different rooftop play areas that were associated with childcare centers. And one of them was in the downtown core along a truck corridor. And with such heavy concerns over safety and some perhaps ill-equipped understanding of the acoustical environment, they built 10-foot walls. And what happened is they created a highly reverberant space inside the outdoor play area.
Wow.
So it was nasty, like, you know, the tires would reverberate around the space. But more importantly, it disconnected the sonic environment which the children were in. So they didn't know, you know, that they wouldn't hear a familiar sound coming 5 blocks away, like a fire engine. Next thing you know, boom, the fire engine was there. Or they lost the opportunity to hear some other neighborhood sound marks. The opposite was another outdoor play area where the children were shielded by sort of a layering system, where there was a rail, but then before the rail there was some bedding plants, and then after the rail there was some more bedding plants. So there was no way they were going to go over a standard height rail. But they had this whole sonic connectivity with the buskers down on the street level, or with the different activities that were happening, whether it was a demonstration, positive or negative, or whether it was the parents coming to get them and giving them a little toot. So that's the sonic connectivity that I'm really excited about exploring.
What about the birds and the bees and in the trees? The birds twerping.
Absolutely.
Tweeting.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
And that gets back to Sadhu's issue about, you know, grade to roof connectivity. We're using those tree canopies to help create that connectivity as well, not just the stairs and the loading bays and loading shacks.
There's a lot of wildlife in Vancouver, both you know, animal, bird, and teenager wildlife. There's a tradition in Vancouver. The youth, if they can't go to the beach, they often climb the top of the apartment building, and it's unsupervised, often no edge, but they learn to behave themselves and not attract too much attention. But it's quite amazing.
Scary.
Yes.
So, my dear panel, we're coming to the quarter of the hour here, and it's time for us to close up. And I was wondering if any of you would like to make some closing statements regarding introducing Sky Gardens into the public realm, and a vision that you may have for that. And then we'll wrap up the session. And from my understanding, we're going to reconvene in a text format on March 6th and answer some questions from our public realm. So you want to start, Randy? Any comments?
Certainly. Vancouver has a great opportunity with the bridges, and the waterfront. We have these public corridors already, and if we can build upon that and link them sideways into private development, up and down, I think we have a great opportunity. Maybe we won't have the High Line or the Sky Park in Singapore, but there's great opportunities. The restaurants are captivating on rooftops with their gardens. So I think there's a tradition we can build upon.
Thank you. Puay?
Yeah, coming from the view of Singapore, I think Singapore is really very green. But my own sort of studies suggest that as the population density increases further, we're going to find pressures for keeping the kind of green spaces that we currently enjoy, especially spaces that are open to public in the form of recreation areas. So really what I think is important going forward here is that we need to relook at some of our policies that may, in the future, for instance, require spaces even on private buildings to be made open to public for recreational purposes. So, so the kind of challenges that we face is not just about having technological innovations. I think the kind of policies that need to be put in place to support and keep Singapore being green is also going to be very important going forward. Yeah, and I think in that regard, that there's much to be learned from different cities. So I'm looking and trying to be in tune with what other cities, for instance, such as Vancouver is doing, or what Tokyo, for instance, is doing, to look at policy innovations to keep the kind of green spaces that we currently enjoy. Yeah.
Thank you. And Sadhu?
Well, building off of what Randy said about the incredible opportunity we had, and what Piyok said about kind of the policy changes that need to happen, I think the third dimension there is the change in our own culture and how we perceive of these spaces, and recognizing that change doesn't happen overnight in that way. And and as we do build these spaces, and as we develop the policies to bring them online, there is a part of the work around, in a way, our own communities relearning how to use these spaces and how these spaces are perceived. I was in Chicago years ago, working in the mayor's office, and we had a fire call actually. Someone at the Sears Tower had seen a fire on top of an adjacent roof, and the roof was about an 80-story building, and it was a new building, and it was on fire. And the roof, the call was that the green roof had combusted, spontaneously combusted was the call, and so the fire department called me and said, you should head over here as well. And so I went over with them and went up to the roof, and the green roof was on fire, and it was a brand new green roof, and they had used a form of matting that was almost made out of bags. It was kind of almost a canvas material, a burlap. It was a burlap, and a bunch of the workers from the building had gone up and were smoking up on the green roof and throwing their cigarette butts out. And the irrigation system was still getting fired up. It wasn't working, and the thing caught on fire. And the only way they knew about it was people up on the 100th floor of the Sears Tower looking down on it. And and in that way, it's like green roofs and roof gardens. They have edges to them, and they're made out of different materials, and they're not the same as walking out into a park on the street. And I do think there's a learning, there's kind of a cumulative education that we're going to need to teach ourselves and go through as we learn about these new spaces, and as we really do new things in the public realm and even in the private realm on top of these spaces. So that's, I think, the last point I'd like to make here, is that this is not about a technology. It's not about a policy only. Those are two important parts, but it's really about teaching ourselves how to think about these spaces differently and how to use the spaces differently. So I think we have an exciting decade ahead as we really rethink the use of these spaces, and it's so exciting. The opportunity is unlimited.
Okay, well, thank you for that, and I thank all of you, and I think we'll reconvene, answer some questions, and
thanks, Maureen.
Cheers.